They mocked her in public until the billionaire claimed her honor with one kiss. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The doctor said he was dying, but little did he know, someone was about to give him a reason to live, and the love he never thought possible. Let's begin. Dr. Michael Carter sat in his office. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights, the only sound in the otherwise quiet room. He had barely slept the night before, his mind racing with thoughts of Emily's visit. Could it really be that simple? Could she truly give him a reason to live? The doctors had told him there was nothing more they could do, that his fate was sealed. But Emily's words had sparked something inside him. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. His thoughts wandered back to his daughter, Emily. He hadn't seen her in so long, and now he realized how much he missed her. She was all grown up now, living her life. And yet, he had pushed her away for years. The regret gnawed at him, but it was too late to turn back the clock. He had to find a way to make things right, if only for her. As the hours ticked by, Dr. Carter found himself lost in thought, considering Emily's suggestion. He didn't know if he was ready to open up to anyone, but the truth was, he couldn't keep going on this way, isolating himself from the world. For the first time in ages, he wondered if it was possible to heal not just physically, but emotionally as well. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe the key to his recovery wasn't just medicine, but human connection, something he had neglected for far too long. Later that afternoon, Dr. Carter received a call. It was Emily again. He had been expecting it, though he wasn't sure what to say when she spoke. Her voice was calm, yet there was a sense of urgency in it that caught his attention. Dr. Carter, I was thinking about what we talked about earlier, and I want to help more, Emily said, her tone filled with quiet determination. I know you're facing a lot right now, but I believe we can work through this together. You don't have to do it alone. Dr. Carter's heart raced as he listened. He hadn't expected her to be so persistent, but there was something about her that made him believe she truly cared. He had spent so much time fighting battles on his own that the idea of accepting help felt foreign. But Emily was different. She wasn't just offering help. She was offering a chance for something more, something meaningful. I don't know how you can help, Dr. Carter admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctors said. He stopped himself, unable to finish the sentence. He didn't want to talk about his illness anymore. He didn't want to accept the fact that he was dying. Emily's voice softened. I'm not asking you to ignore what the doctors said. I'm asking you to consider something else. Your life has meaning beyond just surviving. There are people who care about you, and I think it's time you allow yourself to care about others too. We're in this together, okay? For a long moment, Dr. Carter was silent. The weight of her words hung in the air, filling the space between them. He wasn't sure if he was ready to take that first step, but something about Emily's voice, the way she spoke with such kindness, made him feel like maybe he wasn't so alone after all. Okay, he finally said, his voice steady but unsure. What do you want me to do? Emily smiled, though he couldn't see it. And for the first time in a long time, Dr. Carter felt a flicker of hope. Let me take you out tomorrow. We'll go for a walk. No doctors. No hospitals. Just us. I'll show you that there's more to life than what you're going through right now. You deserve a chance to feel alive again, Michael. And I'm going to help you find it. J, live, Jade, J, live, J, run, J, say, roll, one, run, run. He couldn't remember the last time someone had said something so simple, yet so powerful. A walk. It seemed almost too simple, too insignificant, compared to the battle he was facing. But somehow, it felt like the beginning of something he hadn't realized he was missing. The next morning, Dr. Carter found himself waiting outside his office, a rare feeling of anticipation in his chest. Emily had insisted on meeting him outside the hospital, saying that it would be better for him to step away from the sterile, clinical environment for a while. As he waited, he couldn't help but notice how different everything seemed. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world outside didn't seem so dark. Emily arrived a few minutes later, smiling as she approached him. She looked nothing like the medical professionals he was used to seeing every day. There was something about her warmth, her casual demeanor, that made him feel at ease. She was dressed in simple clothes, nothing fancy, but her presence seemed to brighten everything around her. "You ready for that walk?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with a playful hint of excitement. Dr. Carter nodded, surprised by how much he wanted to take this first step. They walked side by side, slowly at first. But as they continued, something shifted inside him. He felt lighter, as if the weight of his illness wasn't quite so heavy anymore. He had always been so focused on what was wrong with him. But today, Emily was showing him a different way to see things. She wasn't asking him to ignore his reality. She was just reminding him that there was more to life than his diagnosis. As they walked, Emily spoke about her own life, her work, and the people she helped. Dr. Carter listened, intrigued by her passion, and the way she spoke with such genuine care for the people she worked with. He hadn't realized how much he had missed connecting with others until now. As they reached the park, Emily pointed out a bench under a large oak tree and invited him to sit. "I know this isn't going to solve everything," she said, sitting beside him. "But sometimes, just taking a moment to breathe, to look at the world around you, is enough to remind you that there's still hope. You don't have to carry this burden alone, Michael. And you don't have to be a doctor to understand that you're worth fighting for." Dr. Carter felt something stir inside him. Maybe it was the fresh air, the quiet of the park, or maybe it was Emily's unwavering belief in him. Whatever it was, he realized that for the first time in months, he felt like he was actually living, not just surviving. And in that moment, he understood that Emily wasn't just offering him a chance at recovery, she was offering him a chance at life again. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." Emily smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "You don't have to say anything, Michael. Just know that you're not alone anymore. We'll take it one day at a time." And for the first time in a long time, Dr. Carter believed her. The days that followed were a blur for Dr. Michael Carter. The world around him seemed to shift in small but significant ways. He had always been a man of action, someone who dealt with problems head-on. But now, after his walk with Emily, he found himself doing something he had never really done before. Thinking about life, about love, about the things he had neglected over the years. As he sat in his office late one evening, reviewing patient files, his mind wandered to the conversation they had shared in the park. The simple act of walking, of talking, had brought a sense of peace to his otherwise chaotic mind. Emily had shown him that there was more to life than the cold walls of the hospital and the sterile routine he had been trapped in for so long. He was still skeptical about the future. But for the first time in months, he felt like there might be a way forward. The weight of his illness was still there, pressing on him like a heavy cloud, but it no longer felt quite as suffocating. Emily had promised him that she wouldn't let him face this alone, and he began to believe her. Her visits became more frequent. At first it was small things, bringing him coffee in the mornings, sitting with him during his treatments, and sharing stories about her work and her own struggles. She had a way of making everything seem more manageable, of turning his worst days into something bearable. He found himself looking forward to her visits, even if they were brief. He couldn't explain it, but there was something about her presence that grounded him, something that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. It was a Friday when Emily showed up unexpectedly at his office, her smile wide and her energy contagious. "How's the patient doing today?" she asked, a playful glint in her eyes. Dr. Carter couldn't help but chuckle. "The patient is doing just fine," he said, looking up from his paperwork. "In fact, I think he's doing better than he was a week ago." Emily tilted her head slightly, a small smirk playing on her lips. "Is that so? I must be doing something right then." She sat across from him, pulling out a small notebook from her bag and scribbling something down. "I was thinking about something," she said after a moment of silence. "You've been so focused on surviving, on fighting this illness, but have you thought about living, Michael? I mean, really living. Not just going through the motions, but truly living." He looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean by living?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. He had spent so much time in the hospital, focusing on his recovery, that the idea of truly living seemed distant, almost impossible. But Emily was different. She saw things in a way he didn't. "I mean," she began, choosing her words carefully, "what if we stop waiting for things to get better, and instead, we make things better? What if we started doing things that make us feel alive? Not just working or going through treatments, but truly living in the moments we have." Dr. Carter was silent for a long moment. The idea of living for the sake of living, of finding joy in the small moments, seemed foreign to him. But Emily's words had a way of making him question everything. Maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't just about surviving. It was about truly living. The next day, Emily invited him to a small charity event at a local community center. It was an event she had been working on for weeks, raising money for underprivileged children, and she insisted that he come as her guest. Dr. Carter wasn't sure what to expect, but he agreed. He put on his suit, a gift from Emily, and made his way to the event, his mind still heavy with doubt. But as soon as he stepped into the bustling community center, something shifted. The energy in the room was infectious. There were children running around, laughing and playing, their parents chatting and enjoying themselves. It wasn't the sterile, impersonal environment he was used to. It was full of life, of connection, of people coming together for a cause. It was the kind of place that made you believe in the goodness of humanity. Emily spotted him almost immediately, her face lighting up when she saw him. She waved him over, and he made his way to her. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I know this is a little outside your usual routine, but I think you needed to be here. There's something about seeing people come together to help others that puts everything into perspective." As the night went on, Dr. Carter found himself engaged in conversations with people he would never have met otherwise. He was struck by the way everyone interacted, the kindness and generosity that seemed to flow naturally in the room. It was a stark contrast to the cold, impersonal world he had been living in. He saw families laughing, helping each other, and sharing stories. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. At the end of the evening, Emily took him aside, her eyes filled with sincerity. "You see what I mean?" she asked, her voice soft but certain. "This is what it means to live. It's not about waiting for things to happen, it's about making things happen. And Michael, you're a part of this now. You're part of something bigger than yourself." Dr. Carter stood there for a moment, taking it all in. He didn't know if he was ready to embrace this new way of thinking, but something in him had shifted. Maybe this wasn't just about him anymore. Maybe it was about the people he could help, the lives he could touch. Maybe it was about love and connection and healing, not just for him, but for everyone around him. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for showing me that there's more to life than surviving." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're welcome, Michael. Now, let's take this one step at a time. You're not alone in this journey anymore." And for the first time in months, Dr. Carter believed her. The weeks that followed were a turning point for Dr. Michael Carter. Each day seemed to carry with it a new sense of purpose that he hadn't known for years. Emily had kept her word, checking in on him regularly, taking him out of his comfort zone, showing him that there was more to life than just surviving. He began to feel a shift inside himself, a change he couldn't quite explain but knew was real. He no longer felt the constant weight of his diagnosis looming over him. Yes, the doctors still said his condition was terminal, but something in him had started to fight, not just for his health, but for a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Emily had given him something he hadn't realized he was missing: a reason to live and a reason to hope. One afternoon, as Dr. Carter sat at his desk, reviewing his patient files, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Hey, I've got a surprise for you. Meet me at the park in an hour, and don't bring your doctor's bag." It was an odd request, but he didn't question it. Over the past few weeks, Emily had become his anchor, the one person who had shown him that life was still worth living, even with all the uncertainty. He arrived at the park just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over everything. Emily was waiting for him by a bench, her arms crossed, a look of excitement on her face. "Come on," she said with a smile, her eyes sparkling. "I have something I want to show you." Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow but followed her without hesitation. They walked through the park in comfortable silence, the sound of their footsteps blending with the rustling of the trees. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt completely different from the sterile halls of the hospital, where his life had once revolved around clinical numbers and medical charts. After a few minutes, they arrived at a small, open space in the park. Emily stopped and turned to face him. "Okay, here it is," she said. "This is where I want you to start." "Doctor." Carter looked around, confused. There was nothing special about the place. It was just a quiet corner of the park, a patch of grass surrounded by trees. "Start with what?" he asked, genuinely unsure. Emily smiled knowingly. "Start with living. This is where we're going to plant your garden." She pointed to the empty plot of land in front of them. "I've already talked to the city about it, and they're happy to let us use this space. I know it's a small thing, but it's a start." Dr. Carter was taken aback. "A garden?" he asked, not sure he understood what she meant. Emily nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, a garden. You're going to grow something. Flowers, vegetables, anything. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you put your hands in the dirt and start something new, something you can watch grow, just like you." For a moment, Dr. Carter didn't know what to say. He was a surgeon, a man who had spent his entire life focused on the science of healing, not on planting flowers or tending to a garden. But something about the idea struck him. Maybe it was the simplicity of it, or maybe it was the idea of nurturing something, anything, back to life. He looked at Emily, who was watching him with an expression full of hope. "I don't know the first thing about gardening," he admitted, laughing lightly. Emily just smiled. "That's okay. I'll be here to help. We'll start small. The important part is that you begin. This is about taking control of something in your life, something you can nurture and watch, grow. And who knows, maybe it'll remind you that you still have time to grow too." Dr. Carter felt a strange sense of comfort in her words. He wasn't sure how it would all work, but the idea of having something tangible to focus on, something that didn't involve his medical condition or his past mistakes, was a welcome change. He had spent so much time feeling like his life was out of his hands, like he was just waiting for the inevitable. But Emily had shown him that there was more he could do. There were still small victories to be won. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Carter threw himself into the garden project. Emily was right by his side, showing him how to plant the seeds, how to care for the soil, and how to watch for the small signs of life that would soon emerge. The work was therapeutic, something he hadn't expected. As he planted each seed, he found himself reflecting on his own life, on the things he had neglected, the relationships he had broken, and the opportunities he had missed. He thought about his daughter, Emily, and how he had pushed her away for so many years. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could start rebuilding now. As the days passed, the garden began to show signs of life. The first flowers bloomed, and the vegetables started to sprout. It was slow, steady progress, but it was progress. Dr. Carter found himself looking forward to his time in the garden, feeling a sense of pride in the work he was doing. It wasn't about the outcome. It was about the process. He was learning to live again, one small step at a time. One evening, as he sat in the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emily joined him. "You're doing great," she said, sitting beside him. "You've come so far." Dr. Carter smiled, his heart full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You've given me a reason to live again." Emily looked at him with soft eyes. "You've always had that reason, Michael," she replied. "You just had to find it." As they sat there in the garden, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, Dr. Carter realized that Emily had been right. This was just the beginning. His journey of healing wasn't just about his physical health. It was about rediscovering the joy of living, of connecting with others, and of finding peace within himself. And for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about what the future might bring. As the days turned into weeks, Dr. Michael Carter began to notice a shift not only in his physical well-being, but in his entire outlook on life. He spent more and more time in the garden, watching as the plants grew stronger, just like him. Each sprout, each blossom, felt like a small victory. A reminder that, even in the darkest times, life could still find a way to bloom. Emily continued to be by his side, supporting him with each step, encouraging him to keep going, even when the road felt uncertain. But it wasn't just the garden that was growing. Something inside him was too. Slowly, he started to reconnect with the world around him, with the people he had once shut out. His relationship with Emily deepened, though neither of them had put a label on it. There was an understanding between them, a quiet bond that had been built on trust, care, and a shared journey of healing. One day, Emily arrived at the garden earlier than usual, her face bright with excitement. She had a piece of news that she couldn't wait to share. "I got a call today," she said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "Your daughter, Emily. She wants to come visit. She said she's been thinking about you a lot lately and wants to see you." Doctor. Carter's heart skipped a beat at the mention of his daughter, Emily. It had been years since he last saw her, and he had missed so much of her life. The thought of reconnecting with her after all this time filled him with a mixture of joy and fear. Could he fix what he had broken? Could he make up for lost time? He stared at Emily, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, unsure of what the right words were. He had spent so many years pushing his daughter away, focusing on his career and personal struggles, that now, the idea of reconnecting seemed overwhelming. "It's been so long. I don't know if she'll even want to see me." Emily placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She wants to see you, Michael," she said softly. "You just need to be there. You don't need to have all the answers. Sometimes, just showing up is enough." Her words were simple, but they struck a chord deep within him. Emily was right. He didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to try, to make an effort, to bridge the gap he had created. He had already come so far in his journey to heal himself, and now it was time to heal the relationships that had been neglected. The day Emily arrived was bright and warm, the sun casting a golden glow over everything. Dr. Carter waited by the front door, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't seen her in so long he wasn't sure how to even begin. When the doorbell rang, he froze for a moment, taking a deep breath before he opened it. Standing there, just like he remembered, was his daughter. She had grown into a beautiful young woman, her face full of warmth and curiosity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was so much to say, but the words didn't come easily. Finally, Emily stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. "Hi, Dad," she said, her eyes searching his face. "I've missed you." Those words, so simple, yet so powerful, broke the dam of emotion that had been building inside him. Dr. Carter felt the years of distance melt away in that instant. He wanted to hold her, to apologize for everything he had done, but he wasn't sure if she would accept it. Instead, he stepped back, motioning for her to come inside. "I've missed you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. I've been a terrible father." Emily shook her head, a small smile forming on her lips. "You're here now. That's all that matters." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, And for the first time in years, Dr. Carter felt like everything was right again. He held her tightly, as though he could somehow make up for all the lost years in that one embrace. They spent the afternoon talking, catching up on everything that had happened in their lives since they had last seen each other. Dr. Carter told her about his illness, about his journey of healing, and the changes he had been going through. Emily listened, offering support and understanding, never once making him feel guilty for the time they had lost. It felt like the weight of the past was slowly being lifted, piece by piece. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Dr. Carter realized that this moment, this reunion, was exactly what he had needed. It wasn't about fixing everything or making up for all the years lost. It was about taking the first step, about showing up and being present. And in that moment, he understood that the healing process wasn't just about him. It was about reconnecting, about rebuilding relationships that had been broken, and about finding love in the places he least expected. "Thank you for coming, Emily," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I didn't know how much I needed this." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "You don't have to thank me, Dad. We're family, and that's what matters." Dr. Carter watched her, his heart full of gratitude. He had spent so much of his life running away from the things that truly mattered. But now, with Emily back in his life, he knew he had a second chance. A chance to heal, to love, and to be the father he had always wanted to be. And as they stood there in the fading light of the day, Dr. Carter realized that this was just the beginning of his new life. The life that Emily had shown him was possible. A life filled with love, hope, and the promise of second chances. As the weeks passed, Dr. Michael Carter felt a profound shift within himself. The reunion with Emily had brought back memories of the life he had let slip away. But more importantly, it gave him a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he didn't feel trapped by his illness. Instead, he felt free. Emily had shown him that life wasn't just about survival. It was about living with intention, with love, and with connection. He found himself looking forward to the moments they spent together, whether they were in the garden, talking about his recovery, or just sitting in comfortable silence. There was still a long way to go, but he knew he wasn't facing it alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Emily invited Dr. Carter to a small gathering at the community center. It was a fundraiser for a local charity she had been working with, and she insisted that he attend. "You've come so far, Michael," she had said. "I want you to see the impact you've already made." At first, Dr. Carter hesitated. He was still adjusting to the idea of being around people after years of isolation. But Emily's encouragement was all he needed. He agreed, and together they went to the event. As they arrived at the community center, Dr. Carter was struck by how different everything seemed. The last time he had attended such an event, it felt like an obligation, something to check off a list. But now, with Emily by his side, it felt different. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter, music, and the genuine connection of people coming together for a cause. He could see the joy in Emily's eyes as she introduced him to the volunteers and the donors, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. Throughout the evening, Emily kept a steady hand on his shoulder, guiding him through conversations and introducing him to people who were equally passionate about making a difference. Dr. Carter was surprised at how easily he fell into these conversations, listening to stories of personal triumphs and struggles, of people who had faced challenges and emerged stronger for it. He realized that, despite his own illness, he wasn't alone. There were so many others, fighting their own battles, each with their own story to tell. At one point, Emily led him to a small stage at the back of the room where a few local artists were showcasing their work. As they stood there, admiring the pieces, a woman approached them, her face bright with excitement. "Michael, you made it!" she exclaimed, her voice full of warmth. "I'm so glad you're here." The woman introduced herself as Sarah, one of the event organizers, and Dr. Carter quickly realized she was a longtime friend of Emily's. They exchanged pleasantries, and before long, Emily was talking about the charity's work and how it was helping underprivileged youth get access to art programs. As they talked, Sarah's passion for the cause was evident, and Dr. Carter found himself drawn into the conversation. He had always appreciated the arts, but he never considered how something as simple as painting or drawing could be a lifeline for someone in need. By the time the evening was winding down, Dr. Carter felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He had expected to feel out of place, uncomfortable in a room full of strangers, but instead, he felt connected. He realized that this wasn't just about his recovery. It was about creating something meaningful with the time he had left. It was about being present for the people who mattered, about contributing to a cause that could make a real difference. As they left the event and walked out into the cool night air, Emily turned to him with a smile. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice soft, but filled with curiosity. "Doctor." Carter paused for a moment, taking in the quiet night. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for once, he didn't feel alone. "I feel alive," he said quietly, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I didn't expect to feel this way. I didn't expect any of this." Emily reached out and gave his arm a gentle squeeze. "That's because you're living again, Michael. You're not just surviving anymore." He nodded, a sense of gratitude filling his chest. He had spent so much of his life focused on his work, on fixing other people's problems, that he had forgotten how to fix his own life. But now, with Emily's support and the connections he was building, he felt like he had finally found the way forward. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Carter continued to work on his recovery, not just physically, but emotionally. Emily encouraged him to meet with some of his old colleagues, to reconnect with friends he hadn't spoken to in years, and to reach out to the people he had pushed away. Slowly but surely, Dr. Carter began to rebuild the relationships he had lost. And with each new connection, he found himself healing in ways he hadn't anticipated. He wasn't just healing his body. He was healing his heart, rediscovering the things that truly mattered. One afternoon, as they were sitting in the garden together, Dr. Carter turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice soft but steady, "about everything that's happened. I never thought I'd get to this point. I thought I was beyond help, beyond redemption." Emily turned to him, her eyes full of understanding. "You weren't beyond anything, Michael," she said gently. "You just needed someone to remind you of what you're capable of. You needed someone to help you find your way back to yourself." Dr. Carter smiled, his heart full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done," he said quietly. Emily shook her head, her smile warm and reassuring. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to keep going. Keep living. That's all that matters." And as they sat there, surrounded by the blooming flowers and the peaceful sounds of nature, Dr. Carter realized that Emily had given him something far more valuable than just the chance to live. She had given him the chance to love again, to embrace the life he had once thought he had lost. As the days grew warmer, Dr. Michael Carter continued to transform, both physically and emotionally. And it wasn't just his recovery that had changed. It was his entire outlook on life. The garden had become his sanctuary, a place of healing not just for his body but for his soul. Emily's support had been a constant reminder that he didn't have to face everything alone. She had shown him that love, kindness, and the connections we build with others are just as vital to recovery as any medical treatment. The bonds he had begun to rebuild, especially with his daughter Emily, were starting to feel like the glue that held everything together. But despite all the progress he had made, there was still one obstacle he needed to overcome: the deep sense of guilt that had haunted him for years. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Dr. Carter stared at the sunset, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple, lost in his thoughts. Emily sat beside him, her gaze following his. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but he could sense the weight of the unspoken words that hung in the air. "I've been thinking a lot about the past," he said finally, his voice low and hesitant. "About the things I did, the things I didn't do, about how I pushed people away, especially Emily. I don't know how to make up for all that time we lost." Emily turned to him, her expression gentle but firm. Michael, you're doing it right now. By being here, by being open to change, by healing yourself and those around you. You're not perfect. None of us are. But you're trying. And that matters more than anything else. Her words were simple, but they resonated deeply with him. He had spent so many years focusing on his flaws and mistakes that he had forgotten the power of trying, of being willing to grow. It wasn't too late to start over, to rebuild the relationships he had almost destroyed. The next morning, Dr. Carter woke up with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. As he walked through the garden, the familiar feeling of peace settled over him. The flowers he had planted, the vegetables that had begun to thrive, all seemed like small miracles in their own right. He realized that these small acts of care, these moments of patience, were not just about gardening, they were about life itself. He had been given a second chance, not just by the doctors or by medicine, but by Emily, by the love and support she had shown him when he thought he had nothing left to give. Later that day, Emily called him and suggested they take a trip to the lake. It's time to get away for a while, she said. You've been working so hard on the garden and your recovery, but you need to rest too. Let's just go and clear our minds for a bit. Dr. Carter hesitated. He had always been a man of routine, and the thought of stepping away from his carefully planned days was intimidating. But Emily's voice was filled with such warmth, such understanding, that he couldn't say no. You're right, he replied. Let's go. When they arrived at the lake, the world seemed to slow down. The water was calm, reflecting the clear blue sky, and the gentle sound of the breeze rustling through the trees was soothing. They set up a small picnic by the shore, and for a while, they simply sat in silence, watching the ripples on the water. It was a quiet kind of peace, the kind that didn't need words. Emily turned to him, her face serene, and said, This is what I meant, Michael. This is what it means to live. It's not about the big moments or the grand gestures. It's about the little things, the moments that make you feel alive, like this. Dr. Carter nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. He hadn't realized how much he had been missing these simple moments, how much he had been craving connection, until now. For so long, he had been consumed by his work, by the constant pressure to be the best, the smartest, the most accomplished. But in this quiet moment by the lake, surrounded by the beauty of nature and Emily's steady presence, he understood what it truly meant to live. As the day went on, they talked, not about his illness or his past, but about the future, about the things they wanted to do, the people they wanted to become. For the first time in years, Dr. Carter felt hopeful about what lay ahead. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He had Emily by his side, and that was enough. She had shown him the way, not by telling him what to do, but by living her own life with purpose and grace. And now, he was ready to do the same. That night, as they made their way back to the car, Emily smiled at him, her eyes sparkling in the soft glow of the evening. You're doing great, Michael, she said, her voice filled with pride. You've come so far, and I know you're only going to keep growing. Dr. Carter smiled back, his heart full. I couldn't have done it without you, he said softly. You've shown me what it means to live, to love, and to forgive. I don't know how to thank you for that. Emily reached out and placed her hand on his arm. You don't have to thank me, she said gently. Just keep living. That's all I need. And as they drove back home, Dr. Carter felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. He had learned to embrace life again, to take things one day at a time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Emily by his side, he knew he could face anything. The second chance he had been given was more than just a gift. It was a new beginning. As the weeks continued to pass, Dr. Michael Carter found himself in a place he never thought he would be. He was no longer just a doctor fighting for his own survival. He had become a man who was rediscovering the meaning of life, of love, and of human connection. The garden had become his sanctuary, and the peace it brought him was like nothing he had ever experienced before. It was no longer just about fighting his illness, it was about creating something beautiful and meaningful, a tangible reminder of his healing journey. Emily had been with him every step of the way, her presence constant and reassuring. She had shown him that it wasn't just about surviving, it was about truly living, no matter what challenges life threw at him. One evening, as Dr. Carter was walking through the garden, his thoughts turned inward. He had come a long way, since the days when he was consumed by his career, by his illness, and by his guilt. He no longer felt like he was fighting a losing battle. He was making progress, slowly but surely, and for the first time in years, he felt optimistic about the future. The guilt that had once weighed heavily on his shoulders, guilt for neglecting his daughter, for pushing away the people who cared about him, had begun to fade. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he was finally learning to forgive himself and move forward. Emily joined him in the garden, her footsteps light and purposeful. She had a soft smile on her face, the kind that had become so familiar to him in recent months. "How's the garden doing today?" she asked, her voice filled with warmth. Dr. Carter smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "It's doing well," he replied. "I think it's doing better than I am, to be honest." Emily laughed gently, sitting down on the bench beside him. "I don't think it's a competition," she said with a wink, "but it's good to see you so relaxed." "Michael." He nodded, taking a deep breath and looking around at the flowers and plants that had flourished under his care. "I never thought I'd find peace in a garden," he said, his voice quiet, but sincere. "It's funny, when I was younger, I was always focused on achieving, on getting ahead. I never thought about the simple things. But now, it feels like all I need is right here." Emily placed a hand on his arm, her expression soft and understanding. "You're learning to slow down," she said gently. "And that's a beautiful thing." Dr. Carter looked at her, his heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly. "You've shown me that there's more to life than just pushing forward all the time. You've shown me that there's beauty in stillness, in just being present." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "You're doing the hard work, Michael," she said softly. "I'm just here to help you see it. But you're the one who's making the change. You're the one who's learning to live again." Dr. Carter felt a lump form in his throat, his emotions overwhelming him. He had spent so much time feeling alone, so much time thinking he was beyond saving. But now, with Emily by his side, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't known in years. The days continued to pass, and with each one, Dr. Carter felt himself growing stronger. Not just physically, but emotionally. He had started to reconnect with his daughter, Emily, and their bond had begun to heal. Slowly, but surely. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of uncertainty, moments when the weight of the past seemed unbearable, but he knew he was on the right path. He had learned that healing wasn't just about the body, it was about the heart too. And that's where the real work was being done. One day, as Emily arrived at the garden, her face lit up with excitement. Dr. Carter couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. "I've been thinking about something," Emily said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "I know you've been working on your recovery, but how about we take a step further? What do you think about sharing your story with others? You've been through so much, and I think your experience could help so many people who are struggling." Dr. Carter was quiet for a moment, considering her words. The idea of sharing his journey with others felt daunting. He had spent so long keeping his struggles private, but Emily was right. Maybe this was the next step in his healing process. He looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "You think people would want to hear my story?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Emily nodded, her expression earnest. "Absolutely. You've been through so much, and you've come out the other side stronger. People need to hear that there's hope, even in the darkest of times. And who better to share that message than someone who has lived it?" Dr. Carter took a deep breath, his heart racing with the thought of opening up to others. "I've never been one for public speaking," he admitted, "but I guess it's worth considering." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with encouragement. "You don't have to do it alone," she said. "I'll be with you every step of the way." In the following weeks, Dr. Carter began to slowly prepare himself for the challenge Emily had suggested. He worked on writing down his story, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. It was difficult at first, so many memories he had tried to suppress, so many painful moments he had avoided, but with each word he wrote, he felt a sense of relief. Maybe telling his story would allow him to let go of the last of his guilt, his fear, and his shame. And maybe, just maybe, it would help others to heal too. As the day of his first speaking event approached, Dr. Carter felt nervous, but he was also ready. Ready to share his journey, ready to show others that it was possible to heal, to live, and to find peace again, no matter how broken you may feel. And as he stood in front of the audience that day, Emily sitting in the front row with a proud smile on her face, he realized something important. He had found his purpose again, not just as a doctor, but as a person, as a human being who was capable of love, forgiveness, and growth. And as he spoke, sharing his story with a room full of strangers, Dr. Carter knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in his life, a chapter filled with hope, healing, and the knowledge that no matter how lost you feel, it's never too late to begin again. As Dr. Michael Carter stood at the podium, his hands slightly trembling, he looked out at the sea of faces in front of him. The room was quiet, all eyes on him. He had never imagined that he would be in this position, not in 1,000 years. A year ago, he had been struggling with his illness, consumed by guilt and regret, too afraid to face the world. But today, here he was, ready to share his journey, to share the lessons he had learned about life, love, and healing. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. The nerves were still there, but they had become a distant hum. The words that Emily had encouraged him to speak felt right. They were his truth, and now he was ready to let them go. He opened his mouth, and his voice filled the room. "Thank you for being here today," he began, his voice steady, but full of emotion. "I have to be honest, standing here, sharing my story with all of you, is something I never thought I would do. A year ago, I was in a completely different place. I was a doctor, a healer, but I had forgotten how to heal myself. I had spent my entire life focused on fixing others, on achieving, on being the best. But in doing so, I lost sight of the things that really matter: my family, my health, my own happiness." He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The faces in the crowd seemed to blur as he looked around, but he focused on the words he needed to say. "It wasn't until I hit rock bottom, until I faced my own mortality, that I realized how much I had taken for granted. I was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and it was as if the world stopped turning. I felt like I was just waiting for the end. But then, something unexpected happened. Someone came into my life who showed me that there was more to living than just surviving. Her name is Emily." Dr. Carter's heart swelled as he spoke Emily's name. She had been his lifeline, the one person who refused to let him give up on himself. She had shown him that healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about love, connection, and finding a purpose beyond the confines of illness. He glanced at the front row where Emily sat, her smile encouraging him. He took another deep breath and continued. "Emily taught me that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we open ourselves to others, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. She helped me rebuild the relationships I had neglected, especially with my daughter, Emily. After years of distance, I was finally able to reconnect with her, to show her that I was still here, still fighting. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But every step I took toward healing was a step toward the person I was meant to be." He paused, his eyes scanning the room again, this time making brief eye contact with a few people in the audience. The room was silent, hanging on his every word. "I've learned that it's never too late to start over," Dr. Carter continued, his voice growing stronger. "It doesn't matter how much time has passed or how many mistakes you've made. What matters is what you do with the time you have left." And I want to remind each of you here today, no matter where you are in your life, that you are not alone. There is always a way forward, always a chance to start again. The first step may be difficult, but it's worth it. Trust me. He gave a small smile, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. I'm not just a doctor anymore. I'm a man who is learning to live again, and I'm thankful every day for the opportunity to do so. The room erupted into applause, and for the first time in a long time, Dr. Carter felt truly alive. It wasn't just the applause that made him feel this way. It was the fact that he had spoken his truth, that he had allowed himself to be vulnerable, and that in doing so, he had opened up a space for healing not just for himself, but for others as well. Later that evening, after the event had ended, Emily approached him. She had been quietly watching from the back of the room, her eyes filled with pride. As she reached him, she wrapped him in a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, Michael," she whispered, her voice full of affection. "You did it." Dr. Carter pulled back slightly, his hands resting on her shoulders. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life. You showed me how to live again." Emily smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "You saved yourself, Michael. I just helped you see it." As they stood there, in the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the memories of what had been and what was to come, Dr. Carter realized that the journey he had started was far from over. But now, it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about living fully, embracing every moment, and giving back to the world what he had taken for so long. He had rediscovered the true meaning of life, and with Emily by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. And as they walked out into the night together, their path illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights, Dr. Carter couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. For the first time, he understood that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about embracing the journey, finding love in unexpected places, and knowing that no matter how many times life knocks you down, there is always a way to rise again.